This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring a discussion on India-Oman bilateral relations. The participants are Anil Wadhwa, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Today we are discussing the visit to India of the Sultan of Oman, who is in the capital today, and he met Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and they both held wide discussions which covered a number of regional and global issues. Ambassador Vadhwa, when you see this visit, which is also happening as the war in Gaza continues, how significant does this visit become, especially in the backdrop of what we see happening in the Middle East?
The visit is taking place in a very important context. Of course, the background to the visit, the timing of the visit, etc., does not have anything to do by way of planning while the Gaza war was on, because the invitation was extended to Sultan Haitham some time ago, and the national security advisor had actually met him personally in Oman to invite him for this visit. So the visit was planned much before. However, given the fact that the visit takes place on the eve or during the Gaza war, assumes a special significance, because Oman is a country which has clearly asked for an immediate ceasefire. It has also said that there is a certain amount of atrocities which the people in Gaza are facing, and that the United Nations Security Council must act very forcefully. So it's one of those countries in the Arab world which has taken a very, very strident position, I would say, as far as this issue is concerned. It would be important to listen to Oman's views and to also hear from them as to what they have in mind as far as the future of Gaza is concerned. Because after all, once the war recedes and there is some sort of a search for a solution, countries like Oman would be the best placed to give suggestions on how to take this whole process forward. And that will be a very important input as far as India is concerned, because India, as you know, is quite friendly with the government of Israel, and at the same time is very friendly with the governments of the Arab world. And in the United Nations, this is reflected in the votes which take place in the United Nations General Assembly and the Security Council. So therefore, Oman's views would become very important. So hence this visit therefore becomes very significant in that context.
Ambassador Wadhwa, as you pointed out, Oman's stand on the Gaza conflict, and they've been very clear in asking for a ceasefire. And we also see that India is one of those countries that have good relations, as you also pointed out, with both Israel and the other Arab countries. How do you think will India going forward manage this thing? Because the conflict in Gaza really doesn't show any signs of coming to any kind of stop or a ceasefire anytime in the near future.
It does seem like there would be some amount of pressure which would come to bear on the Israeli side now, judging by what is happening within the United States itself. As you know, United States is one of those countries which has staunchly stood behind Israel. But lately, with the visit of the National Security Advisor to Israel, it has become very clear that the United States stand in respect to the time that Israel spends in Gaza, and the occupation of Gaza has changed. And the advice from the United States to Israel at the moment is that there should be not disproportionate acts of violence against the local Palestinian population, A, and B, that the operation should be limited to what Israel calls the flushing out of Hamas elements from Gaza. So therefore, going forward, I don't see that this long-term occupation plan of Israel can succeed, especially because the rest of the countries in the world would not like that to happen.
Ambassador Vadhwa, we also see that India and Oman, there have been discussions going on a proposed bilateral free trade agreement, or a CEPA, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. But we also saw the Foreign Secretary brief the media, and it seems that there has been no finalization of this free trade pact. One, how important is it for India and Oman to have a free trade pact? And how do you see these negotiations shaping up? Do you think we will see something coming out finalized very soon, or do you feel that the talks are going to take a little longer?
So I think, what has happened with this free trade agreement is that they have started rather late. But surprisingly, they've made quite a bit of progress, because they're modeled on the UAE agreement that India has. And Oman has put forward the proposal that they would like to follow that agreement, as much as possible. So that makes things a bit easier. There have been 2 rounds of talks which have been held, one in India and one in Oman. The last round was held between 9th and the 12th of this month. So obviously, it is not possible to finalize everything in 2 rounds of talks. But I suspect that because the momentum is there at the end of December, we will probably have another meeting, and thereafter, another maximum couple of months' time, we should see an agreement being finalized with Oman.
Ambassador Wadhwa, also we've seen that the ties between India and Oman and the rest of the Gulf countries in the last decade or so under Prime Minister Modi, we've also seen rapid growth in the strength of these bilateral ties. How much do you think the leadership at the top plays into this? That the bilateral ties, of course, there are various facets to it, but the leadership at the top, how much is their role and their contribution in strengthening these ties?
So, yes, of course, India has reoriented its policy towards the Gulf in particular. And over the last few years, you've seen the amount of visits that have taken place between the two sides, which is much, much more than what used to happen in the past. The focus of the bilateral relationship with these countries has changed quite a bit. It's become very much focused on investments and trade and also defense ties. Earlier, the issue of our diaspora in these countries used to dominate as far as agenda is concerned. But now, with the growing importance of India, the countries of the Gulf also see India as an important destination for their investments and good returns out of the market. And that is why you see a flurry of activity as far as free trade agreements are concerned. UAE one has already happened, the Oman one is happening, and then the GCC is also gearing up as a whole to negotiate a similar agreement. But more importantly, because of the fact that there is a power play which has come in the region in the form of a competition between Russia, China on the one hand, and the United States on the other, the strategic aspect of India's presence in the Gulf becomes that much more important. You've seen how India has, in the recent past, forged ahead with defense relationships. It has also become an important player as far as selling of equipment is concerned, and joint production is being talked about today with a number of countries in the Gulf. So the security aspect, defense aspect has become much more important. You're absolutely right that the leadership role is very important. The initiative that our Prime Minister Modi has taken personally to undertake a number of visits to these countries and also invited a number of their heads to India has definitely played a role. And the fact that Sultan Haitham bin Tariq has only visited 2 other countries since he became Sultan before is also very significant. His last visits have not been much, and the last visit on this trip he's also visited Singapore. But the fact is that India is only the third country that's visiting. So that just goes to show how much importance Oman also thinks that India is, and that going forward wants to take this relationship forward with India.
Master Wadhwa, as you pointed out about the trade with Oman, and we see that India has had trade links with Oman for over 5,000 years now. And currently, it is India's third largest trading partner within the GCC, with bilateral trade in 2022-2023 was worth $12.39 billion. And this is a figure which went up from $5.4 billion in 2020-21. So, as you were also discussing, the potential for trade between India and Oman is huge. And we see that the areas of cooperation that were discussed today, of course, there's agriculture, but there are also new areas like space development. How much do you think these new areas will come up as the relationship progresses?
You're absolutely right that bilateral trade and investments have shown a sudden jump, because going up from $5.4 billion, as you said, to $12.3 billion is not easy. And that means that the relationship has eased up quite a bit and that new avenues have opened up. It's a fact that new areas have come up in the relationship. And as far as space is concerned, I think it's a very promising area of cooperation. During Prime Minister Modi's time, we signed a bilateral agreement with Oman for peaceful uses of outer space. And recently, the Omanis have taken the initiative to invite all heads of our important institutions in India in the space field to Oman to see what can be done bilaterally to take this relationship forward. What should happen in the future is that there could be a joint development as far as satellites are concerned. There could be a launching of an Omani satellite and also cooperation as far as data is concerned. in the space field. And that opens up entirely new avenues for not only for Oman but also for India, because it's very important to cooperate with as many countries as possible. As you know, in India, the private sector is now taking part in the manufacturing of satellite parts, and they will also get involved in future with countries with whom we have a relationship in this space. Then again, when we talk about our bilateral relationship, you talked about agriculture. That's something that Oman realizes is important as far as India is concerned. As a country which can provide food security to Oman, talks about cooperative production in India have been going on for some time now. I hope that they fructify soon and that we can see something concrete emerging in that area as well. Health cooperation has been on the upswing in the recent past, and Oman is very interested in Indian pharmaceuticals, investing in Oman to produce cheaper medicines which can feed the population, which can look after the population of Oman and also the GCC. And with the bilateral free trade agreement in place, this will become much more lucrative for Indian companies to set up shop in Oman.
Mr. Wadhwa, we also see that in the G20 summit, Oman was also invited by India as a special invitee, and we had the Deputy Prime Minister of Oman who led the delegation here. Oman actively participated in over 150 working group meetings, and there were like 9 ministers from Oman who participated in various G20 ministerial meetings. How important do you think is the fact that Oman was also a part of the G20, and especially when the summit is being hosted by India?
I think India did well to invite Oman as a special invitee for the G20 meetings, because Oman is a player as far as India is concerned and is recognized as such. And they responded quite well, as many as 9 ministers, and then taking part in as many as 150 meetings of the G20, which is quite incredible for a small country like Oman to spare those many resources, which means that they wanted to play a bigger role, as much a role as possible for themselves, having been given this opportunity. And I'm sure they've taken back a lot from their participation, and that the ministries and the ministers who've come to India have become closer in their interactions with their Indian counterparts, which will stand us in very good stead in the coming years. Certainly, we can look forward to all-round cooperation with Oman, because it's an easy relationship where trust is a big factor. And we've had 5,000 years of history between us, and therefore the two countries have developed that trust in dealing with each other in various fields. So I'm pretty certain that this move by India will pay dividends in the long term.
Ambassador Wadhwa, we've also seen that India and Oman also share a strong defense cooperation, and actually Oman is one of India's strongest defense partners in the Gulf region. How much does this contribute to India's bilateral ties with Oman, especially when you see China also trying to get into the region and expand its footprints there?
Oman is one of those countries with whom we have a bilateral cooperation in all 3 areas, which is Air Force, Army, and the naval cooperation. Bilateral exercises are held with Oman regularly. We have entered into a defense supply agreement. We have a special agreement with Oman as far as the Duqm port is concerned, and it's an annex to the defense cooperation agreement that we have signed, which means that our ships have turnaround facilities in Duqm, which is very important in this part of the world going forward. And I think the Omanis have realized that it is better to team up with India and then to actually allow the Chinese to do the same there. So far, that is the case. Going forward, we don't know what the relationships will be in the future. But India definitely is well placed to take this bilateral defense cooperation forward. There have been supply of some spare parts also from Oman to India because of the British aircraft which were in service in India. And at the same time, India has supplied some naval equipment to Oman in the past. Going forward, I'm sure there would be other opportunities which will open up for supply of equipment, maybe joint production in the future, because the Indian defense industry is now also growing, and it is inviting countries to invest in India for joint production. So I'm sure Oman going forward will look at India as an important source for its defense needs.
And in the coming days, we will continue our discussions on the India-Oman relationship. With these comments, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on India-Oman bilateral relations. The participants were Anil Wadhwa, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official.